A small message from me before we kick off with today's video. iDRIVEACLASSIC is proud to be sponsored and insured by Adrian Flux. If you haven't heard of Adrian Flux before, they're the UK's leading specialist motor insurance broker, covering everything from classic and vintage cars right through to heavily modified sports cars. So whether you're in a Morris Marina, a 90s retro runabout, or something with a bit more oomph under the bonnet, give them a call for your next policy. I've popped a link to their site in the description box below. Hi guys, it's Steph from iDRIVEACLASSIC, and today I'm back with something that there are only 8 examples of in the UK. It's the Datsun 120 Cherry F2, and I'm very excited to show you this car today because it's quite interesting in A, that it's still surviving, and B, that a 12-year-old boy bought this as his project, he's now 19, for £500 and turned it into this. And I thought, let's celebrate this car, because what a fantastic achievement to make before you're even 20, to create a car which honestly looks very haggard into the car that we see today. And I'm going to show you all around it, take you out for a drive, and let you have a look under the bonnet as well. So let's crack on and take a look around the outside. The 70s was one of the most interesting eras for motoring. Well, in my opinion anyway. We start the era with voiceovers of the motor show declaring the foreign invasion to be unexpected and almost amusing, with real distrust from the old guard. And we end it with a wealth of cars across Britain which have fought really hard to earn their place on people's driveways and impressed even the most hard-faced buyer, for many reasons: for their reliability, for how well they're put together, and because the 70s in Great Britain was a troubled time. People were striking, cars were coming through left, right and centre with bits missing or bits wrong. So the Japanese took that moment and seized it and delivered cars that people were just so impressed by. But is it all rose-tinted specs and fond memories dulled by a vague half recollection of somebody's brother's uncle's dog buying a dodgy Allegro? Or is the nostalgia for 70s Japanese stuff changing the market entirely justified? Well, last summer we took out that incredible little starlet from the 70s, and it really outperformed some of the smaller cars from the era. And for me, it sparked a real interest in Japanese stuff of this era, and I wanted to do more with it and show you more. And so today we're going to do more of the same. So we'll see how this 120A Cherry stands up to the market both at the time and how it's survived through to today. As someone who drives a 70s car daily, I'm going to tell you what this is really like in comparison, what I like about it and what I don't like about it as well. It's also worth noting that as we do the walk around, you'll see Nissan and Datsun badges on this. They're both original, so the Nissan Datsun crossover in the UK was a relatively slow process. It went on for a number of years, whereas in America it happened and it turned around in less than 12 months. So that's why this is dual badged from new, is to really get people used to that brand. The Cherry name as well was used for a long time, so you might have seen this on other cars, but the car we're covering today is known as the 120 Cherry F2. Bit of a tongue twister. The coupe was introduced in 76 and the hatchback in 77. I know that in Japan it was available from much earlier, I think about 74, 75. The Cherry F2 Coupe was an exciting addition to the Datsun range. It was marketed at a time where Datsun was the leading car importer into the UK. So it's a big time for Datsun because, you know, they go from the 60s, 70s, early doors where nothing's happening, through to now where exciting stuff's happening and they're bringing new cars into the UK. Now, when this car was sold in Japan, it was aimed at young couples or single drivers. In this country, it was stylish young people and someone with potentially one child. You struggled to fit more than one in the back comfortably without an argument or two. The Cherry hatchback was powered by the 1171cc engine, also referred to as the 1.2 option. But with the Cherry of this era in the UK, you could get the 1 litre format or the 1.2. Japanese customers were fortunate enough to be offered an additional 1.4 option. For Datsun fans, we've got the A12 engine in this. The performance and fuel economy for the era was fair. It topped out at around 93 miles per hour and could achieve in tests around 40 miles per gallon on the fuel economy. The car's got rack and pinion steering with servo-assisted brakes and discs to front. This was pretty common by this stage of the 70s, but at the time of launch, there were still cars coming to market with drums all round. BL, I am looking at you. Although this wasn't commonplace. This is a front-wheel drive car, which I believe was one of the first for Datsun, having previously only sold rear-wheel drive cars. Again, for the era, rear-wheel drive was quickly being replaced with front-wheel drive. So manufacturers that were looking for emerging trends and desires were pumping for that, whereas people that were stuck in the past were still very much leading with that rear-wheel drive format. The Cherry has a fully synchro box, hurrah, with 4 forward gears, which as you'll see on test is potentially one of the nicest 70s gearboxes I've ever had the pleasure of driving. Suspension is independent front and rear, with coil springs at front with damper struts, lower wishbones and anti-roll bar, and to the back we're working with trailing arms and coil springs. The car retains original engine, gearbox and suspension, so the test we're getting today is pretty fair and true to form, which is quite exciting really. Colour has been changed, which you will notice under the bonnet as well, and is no longer a standard colour. However, I secretly prefer the new shade. I think it's much more of a pop. I love that glitter in the paintwork, and I think it really adds an edge to the car. I should also probably mention that front scuttle that you've probably spotted early on is a period accessory from RGA. It's not original at point of sale, but it's one of those period accessories that's been lost to time, so it's quite exciting to see it on this. Now you're probably wondering, what sort of person owns a car like this? Well, let me introduce you to the owner, Charlie. As I've said already, he is only 19 years old, and he's turned this around from a project car full of holes, including the doors, and it was destined for banger racing, into this fine example that we see before us today. I think he should be really, really proud. It's an excellent car, and I'm really excited to introduce you to him as well, because it takes a lot of skill to turn something that we've seen a clip of before into something like this. And as well as that, it's really breaking the mould. It's not a usual choice for a teenager, but I think he's made a great choice. And for a first restoration, this isn't a bad job.
Hi, I'm Charlie. This is my 1979 Datsun. I bought it when I was 12 because I wanted an old car, but at the time I couldn't really afford anything. So I found the cheapest Datsun I could, and that was what I went with. Then I took a few years to restore it, and now I'm 19 and it looks like this. So it's my first car, and I hope it'll be my last car really. Not planning on getting rid of it anytime soon.
Advertising literature for cars abroad is always absolutely nuts, and this is no exception. From the weird fashion shots all the way through, like this one here, through to there's a cartoon coming up that I wanted to show you. So it's really odd because it's all mixed in with fashion shots, a bit of technical stuff about the car, a lady in headphones, right through to, let me show you this comic. So I'm going to turn this around, and there's a child in the back, and as you can see here, he's actually got, well, he's on some sort of mad adventure, and he's got a Snoopy lunchbox, and then in the back he's laid out doing a jigsaw. So thought I'd show you that too. I'm probably as excited as you are filming this as you are watching it at home. Now, it's funny because 70s Japanese cars are always the ones that people say changed the game completely, because at the start of the 70s, of course, people were very suspicious of Japanese stuff, and by the end people were becoming a little bit less hostile. In fact, they were really warming to it. And the original owner of this car, this was her second Datsun, so it was, I thought that was very interesting, because for a lot of people towards the end of the 70s and into the early to mid 80s, that was when they first started buying Japanese stuff. So the lady who bought this originally was very much an early adopter of Datsun. And you know what? I think she made a really good choice. One of the things that jumped out for me when I was looking through all the paperwork for the car, and a lot of it was in Japanese, so I had to fish through for the British stuff, was that not only did the radio come as standard, but so did the rear heated screen. Today, in 2021, we might think that that's a really normal thing, but when you compare it to British cars of the era, that was a big deal. Now I wanted to talk to you about the rest of what we've got in here, because it is alarmingly well specced out for a vehicle of this era, and also the quality of the finish is very nice. So over in the glove box there, we've got cup holders, which seems, again, normal for today, but very futuristic for the time. Also a bit of nice little paperwork down there. We've got a built-in parcel shelf, and coming into the centre of the car, it's all that moulded black plastic, but it's tinged with chrome, and it just feels very nicely put together. So we've got the radio there, and we come down into the ashtray with a cigar lighter. Again, these are standard, people aren't paying extra for these. Coming down into these heater controls, which are very nicely designed. They would give a car from the 80s a run for its money. We come down into this blanking plate with the detailed design on there, which doesn't make it look too odd or too plain. And then we've got a selection of dials and warning lights in front of us here. So over to our left, we've got the rev counter. In the middle there, you've got the temperature and fuel gauge, our speedo with a trip clock, and some warning lights there. The only one that I can seem to see working is that handbrake one. We've got a selection of additional warning lights in the middle. One of them is oil, one of them is to tell us if the battery's charging, and we've got the high beam there as well. We've got two stalks, we've got the indicators, and then we've got this one for the lights as well. We've got hazards as standard, fantastic, because of course the 70s is that era where hazards go from being a nice to have to something that comes as standard. And then we have got this steering wheel. Now if you are a bit of a Datsun aficionado, you'll notice that the steering wheel isn't the same as the ones they put on in Japan. So apparently this was British issue, and you've got these 3 horn push buttons here as well. So to give that a little toot for you. Not bad. Felt quite authoritative. And then the owner has spent a little bit of money. So you'll have probably noticed when we were looking around that you spotted some of the things that he's done to improve the car. Number one, we've got that colour change, which I think looks fabulous because it's got a bit of glitter in there. So I don't know if you're able to see that at home. And as well, we've got that chrome front. So that grille isn't a standard. So it was, I believe, an optional extra that you could pay money for. And there's only 3 examples known of in the world. 2 in Japan, and this car that's here with us today. So very special indeed. We've also got this, which is an armrest. It looks a bit like, for any of those of you that have bought British stuff, it looks a bit like a car robes add-on, but I believe was something that you could buy from Datsun Nissan at the time. For me, it's a bit too clunky, but the owner absolutely loves it. Again, the only known example, and apparently there aren't any left. So let's get her started up. It's that 1171cc engine under the bonnet. Remember, we only got the 1 litre and the 1.2 options in the UK, whereas Japan got the 1.4. And she sounds excellent. So I'm going to get her started up now, and you can hear what she sounds like. Now, one of the things that really shocked me about this car was how light it was. It is so light. It's so light, it's so quiet, and as we go over those bumps, it takes those really well as well. In fact, it's driving like a car that is maybe 10 or 15 years newer than what we're driving today. Now, we've got the rack and pinion steering, and one of the questions I asked actually was, do we have power steering? Just because it is so light, I can't express to you. I mean, it's so light and so responsive. And as you can see, we've got, I don't know if you can hear it at home, the clutch is slightly slipping, which is hindering our putting our foot down somewhat. Changing gear as well is an absolute pleasure. You get in some 70s cars and the gearboxes are, oh, just wait for it to warm up and it'll be easier to change through gears. No, I do not want to do that when I'm in a hurry. So I've got into this car and it was pretty cold when I got in, and straight away those gear changes are just effortless. They're just effortless. This car is so easy to drive, such a pleasure. So that's super smooth, super responsive steering with 3.2 turns lock to lock is great. It's so much, for me, it's really outperforming some of this 70s British stuff. But it's that coupled with this gearbox and just how modern it feels inside. Now remember, for the Japanese, this was old news. It had been on the market, what, 5-6 years? So when we look at it now, we compare it to stuff that was also out in Britain in 79 and we're going, wow, it's so modern, it's got so much on offer. The Japanese are saying, well, you know, that's not the best that we've done, it's not the latest. And it's quite embarrassing really that you look at some of the stuff that we were churning out and then you look at this, that you do start to see some of those Facebook armchair experts when they go, oh well, the Japanese stuff was so much better. Actually, I think there's some truth in what they're saying, because this is a really, really nice car. Now I know that Charlie has spent a lot of money making it look like this, but you've still got those bare bones of what it really was from new. You've still got this dash, he's not changed that. You've got that steering experience, you've got that gearbox. They're all as it were, or as it was when it was sold. So that is true to form. That is what we would have got from the forecourt. Now, it wouldn't be a good review if I didn't tell you what I didn't like about it. So there's one thing that you'll immediately spot and you might commiserate with, and there's something that you won't know unless you're in the car. So number one, let's talk about what you can't see. That heater. It is rubbish. It is so cold. It's honestly like a mouse's dying breath on my legs. It's rubbish. If I was to drive this in winter, I think I'd be quite uncomfortable. The other thing, of course, is practicality. Because when I'm driving and I'm going somewhere, I'm taking all my friends, and I would not want to be the person to say to two of my friends, you're sitting in the back seat on those seats, because there's almost zero leg room. It's pretty rubbish. However, the back becomes really usable when you fold the back seats down, because of course you've got nearly 5 foot of length of space. I think it's something like 71 cubic square foot of space or something, around about that mark in the back. When you've got those seats folded down, you get all the stuff in. But when you've got people sat on those back seats, sitting on those back seats, it's rubbish. I wouldn't want to be the people in the back. So for me, those are the two drawbacks for this. But as the driver, when I've got that super responsive steering, I've got that lovely gearbox, I've got unrivaled visibility over the bonnet, and these mirrors are lined up, and I had to choose between something like this or the Marina Coupe, I'm really sorry, Morris. I don't know if I would have picked that Marina. So that's kind of it from me today. It's been a bit of a revelation bringing out a 70s Japanese car. I've heard so many good things about them. Their reputation really preceded them, but there was a lot to live up to. And in many ways, this car has surprised me through the technology that certainly wasn't new for Japan, right through to how it is fared to 2021, because it still looks gorgeous today inside. Those plastics have held up well, everything's remarkably well made, the door shuts are good, everything about it is spot on and precise in a way that I haven't seen in many other 70s cars. So top marks, Datsun Nissan. You've won me over with this, and I look forward to adding more 70s Japanese stuff in the near future. So that's all from me today. Until next time, take care and drive safely.